Are you gonna learn how to noodle like that and use your whammy bar and stuff?
Yeah, finger tapping.
Stop playing with your penis.
He's gonna be Ozone Ocean Vi. Just like we're gonna be in the middle of a conversation, and then he's gonna start shredding some sick solos.
Exactly. Look at Dimos. Look at Dimos' expression.
Dimo.
Welcome to the QUACKCAST. This is Drunkduck QUACKCAST number 530. I'm Ozone Ocean, and with me is Taz, Baines, and Pitface.
Hey there.
Hello. I don't know why I was waving.
Yeah, I was wondering at that. That was strange. Unless you could get like sound effects for that, like wave really close to the microphone. Exactly. Give us some Bruce Lee moves. Boom, 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 boom. Well, we're going to be talking about sci-fi today, and the enormous amount of things covered within the umbrella that is sci-fi, from hard sci-fi to speculative to stuff that makes you think, to space opera and pop sci-fi that doesn't make any sense, like Star Wars or Andromeda. That kind of stuff that's a bit more fun. Firefly, you know, fun stuff. And well, I mean, it can all be fun, but the space opera, like pop sci-fi, isn't on the same level as the hard sci-fi. It's a different thing. Anyways, so before we get into that, I have to bring up the featured comic. QUACKCAST gave us a feature this week, and it's a lovely comic called Cupcake War Machine. Take it away, Quai, with Cupcake War Machine.
Hello, this is QUACKCAST, and the feature I've selected for this week is Cupcake War Machine by MKS Monsters, and it is rated E for everyone. Kitchen chemists and home cooks rejoice. Here is a sweet treat. Take a dessert break with special tried and true original and shared recipes. Explore a wide range of sugary treats from Macintosh muffins with a vegan twist, blueberry pancake cake, princess's braid bread, among many others. This is a fascinating illustrated cookbook for all who love measuring ingredients to bake original goodies. The comic shares illustrated recipes that go along with personal accounts and recollections on the comic blurbs. There is even a 2022 calendar now available that relates back to the comic. Take the stress out of stress baking and read Cupcake War Machine by MKS Monsters, rated E.
And that was Quai with her feature, Cupcake War Machine. Alright, so next up, Gumball's has given us a theme, a musical theme. He did this pretty much at the last minute. And he did it well. He came up with the theme. And it is the theme to Starlights, which is a pretty cool comic. If you've ever had a look at that, Quai featured it the other day. So I'd hope you would have looked at it. So when he came up with this theme, he said, I had some time this morning. Here's a theme to Starlights. In my head, I'm imagining you with your new guitar, dressed in a white dandy costume and playing the solo. That's imagining me, because I have this outfit with a tricorn hat and a frock coat and everything like that. And I bought a new guitar, so he was inspired by that, which is pretty cool. So this music...
You are usually quite dandy.
Usually. In my pajamas at the moment, but dandy claret red pajamas with white checkers. So this theme, I would describe it as a dandy gent in a bright white frock coat and tricorn hat festooned with giant ostrich feathers, stands outlined against the stormy grey sky. He shoulders a cream-coloured Stratocaster and shreds, ripping out a soaring solo against the growing winds of the coming storm. So, take it away, Gumwallace, with Starlights. That was Gumwallis with Starlights, Starbrights. It sounded to me, the music sounded to me like Joe Satriani surfing with the alien, if anyone ever remembers the glory of Joe Satriani, which was
surfing with the alien.
Yeah, that was an instrumental only album, but it made like top 10, which is quite rare for back then when there was that kind of music. Wouldn't today. Anyway, Starlights is a comic by Kwai Triangle. So not Kwai Gakusei, this is Kwai Triangle. It's a different Kwai.
Nepotism.
Yeah, they're related. From the Kwai family, basically. It's very highly regarded, very top tier sort of people, the Kwais. So, science fiction is a broad church. There are so many things among it. I mean, there's a lot of people who would say that Star Wars isn't included in science fiction, but I would disagree simply because it's the popular idea of what science fiction is, and who are we to go against that? Like, things like Star Wars and Firefly and Red Dwarf and stuff like that is people's first intro into what sci-fi is, and then they'll slowly get more interested into the harder, more scientific sci-fi, maybe, if that's what they're into, or maybe they'll just stay with the fun kind of silly stuff. There's a few reasons why something like Star Wars is not thought of as serious sci-fi, and even Star Trek as well. Like, one of the problems with something like Star Trek, which I love, it's fantastic. It looks at different ideas and philosophical kind of things and explores them, and has a kind of a social take on a lot of clever concepts and things like that. It's very progressive and such an amazing show, Star Trek. But it isn't good science fiction because it takes a lot of shortcuts, and there's a lot of really basic things that it would get wrong. Like, there's always gravity in these spaceships. They account for that, and they say we have a gravimetric matrix or whatever, and we have we can beam down and we can do all this kind of stuff, but there's a lot of super technology that would even negate the need for a spaceship, because you've got force fields and all this kind of stuff. And if you could beam to places, why don't you have a bunch of beam relays and then just beam across the galaxy and never have to really bother with us? You just send a drone out to put a bloody transporter thing. And then there's of course the aliens. Why are all aliens the same height as humans, with all the same, they've got a head the same as humans have, they've got 4 limbs, they've got nostrils in the same place and eyes in the same place. Evolution doesn't work that way. It only works that way.
Crazy ears, though.
Yes, crazy ears
and
weird
actually
stuff.
I'll put on my geek hat, not for the last time in this hour, I'm sure, but Next Generation kind of addressed that in one episode.
They did. You're right.
The possibility. Yeah.
I said we're all evolved.
Everybody knows what I'm talking about, right?
From the same being, but then again, that doesn't account for the fact that all Earth life is actually evolved from the same stuff. We are related to squids distantly, but we do have a shared DNA. So...
That's how they account for those crazy ears those aliens have. Those crazy foreheads.
But...
Our progenitors sort of seeded the galaxy with their genetic material.
With their forehead genetic material. That's why we're all different variations of a forehead. From Klingons to Kardashians and Cardassians. Romulans.
Speaking of artificial... Yeah, exactly. All same foundation. The artificial gravity thing is funny. I remember seeing fan commentary or other commentary on that. I never picked up on it, but it's the ship, the Enterprise gets damaged and in danger of losing all power so many times, but the gravity always works. And I think the creators came and said, well, yeah, the gravity is like super well protected, the artificial gravity.
They
It's
protect
funny.
the gravity more than they protect like life support.
Life support. Yeah, gravity is essential. You gotta have it. And then I remember on one episode of Voyager, they were like just on multiple episodes, the ship is damaged and they're on the bridge, and one of the officers says, they've lost artificial gravity on deck 25 and 26. And I found that hilarious. They would actually address it, although they didn't show it, of course.
Exactly, yeah. It's just, oh yeah, we actually can't show you what's happening there, but totally.
That's the reality of TV, this budget.
Yeah.
Certain things. Same with teleportation, right? Like, it's much more doable doing that than like having to do a shuttle trip.
In the 1960s, yeah, that was a big thing. That's why they invented it. Because 1960s was when the original series was on. It made it so much easier, budget-wise, in order to just have the same sets, without the transition stuff and making a whole shuttle, and then it became rationalized into the mythology, as it does with this kind of ongoing big canon stuff. But there's other sci-fi that has addressed artificial gravity in a way, like 2001: A Space Odyssey, that has a huge spinning space station. They deliberately addressed it. Babylon 5, they have a giant space station that spins around its axis and creates artificial gravity, and they have spaceships that have spinning parts that address the artificial gravity. So even though that's a space opera and everything else about it really doesn't make sense, they do at least address that part. And I think in Babylon 5 they don't travel faster than light either, so no warp speed.
Yes.
Even something like...
Is most sci-fi, do they do like the idea of the jump, like the hyperspace jump?
Yes.
That's sort of more standard, right, than the warp 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, they're related.
Of Star Trek.
Yeah.
They're related, yeah.
Like, funnily enough, Red Dwarf, which is a sci-fi comedy, is more scientific than Star Wars. No, more scientific than Star Trek. Way more scientific than Star Trek. Because that's done with technology that is originally plausible and then just projected like several million years into the future because, an accident happens on the mining ship Red Dwarf, and the only last human in space, Lister, gets put into stasis, which isn't that's pretty way out. There's no such thing as a stasis thing, but, Anyway, he gets put into a stasis field and preserved for 1 million years and wakes up and his cat has evolved into a human, which again isn't science fiction. Isn't, proper science fiction, but there's a lot of things about it are very science-y, which is quite shocking when it comes to like Star Trek, because they can't travel faster than light and all sorts of other things. I'm not going to go into it now, but it's a good show. You should watch Red Dwarf. Everyone should watch it. It's good. But so yeah, my whole thread here was distinguishing between different kinds of sci-fi and stuff that's not hard sci-fi, because it doesn't really it's not really plausible. I know people have written books about the science of Star Trek, and they have tried to rationalize things out, which is fine, but it's really after the fact. The writers did not have that in mind when they created things like, the holofield, which is a fantastic idea. So that's created in like 1989, 1987, or whenever Star Trek Next Generation started. And the idea there was you could have all sorts of fun adventures like on planets and stuff, but it's in it's meant to be a holographic field on the ship. So it means you can have shots on location sandwiched into your TV show that's all done on a soundstage. and you can have these things joined together, or you can have like whole things taking place within the past or the future or whatever, and have it as part of the same show. So you don't have to have a crazy traveling back in time or something like that, or to a different planet. It's all done on the same place, which is was really clever. So in terms of TV sci-fi, stuff is done because of like budget, or like the needs of the production, and then it comes into the sci-fi canon, which is rather interesting. Like you talked about with teleporters, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so that's the less plausible sci-fi. I think like Star Wars, again, that's another show that's another franchise that is not considered good sci-fi because of the fantasy elements, and it really is extremely fantasy. Again, you've got all the aliens are basically humans with funny masks on. You've got the Force, which is this semi-magical thing that causes you to have teleportation or not. Yeah, teleportation in the latest movie. That's suddenly a new power they've got for some reason. Never seen it before. They have telekinesis. They have ability to use lightsabers and all sorts of crap. And and it's based around the idea that most of the technology is sort of based on a 1970s idea of what futurism is like, and it's fun. I don't know what else to say, but it's not proper sci-fi. But it's incredibly enjoyable.
I mean, I guess you'd call it space opera. Is that where it would be classified in terms of like a genre of fiction, like novels or shows or movies? Like space opera sort of encompasses that more like adventure-based, less
yes,
realistic, like sort of more fanciful, but still with that sci-fi kind of paint job. Or
well, and I think like, the paint job, you're right. I think the actual genesis of the whole space opera genre was basically came out of the 1930s, 1920s, when you have you basically have a lot of people writing these pulp stories, and you have people doing hard sci-fi, and then you have a lot of people doing fantasy, like stories about like Robin Hood or Prince Valiant and that kind of stuff. And then you have the writers who are specializing in doing Robin Hood and Prince Valiant, and they're doing they make the crossover into science fiction, but instead of doing the hard sci-fi stuff like Isaac Asimov and those kind of people, they use the old approach of doing what they do best. They're adventure stories. And out of that comes Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon. So you have people going to, and what's the other one? The John Carter on Mars. So you have people going to different planets. And basically it's just Earth standard adventure stories. But like you say, Baines, the sci-fi paint job. So instead of having, like people going to castles and fighting with swords, we have people going to castles and fighting with laser swords and having a space blaster as well. And that came into the early like movies. So you have the early like silent movies of Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, and them going around in their little spaceships and stuff, and they've got their like weird kind of Elizabethan sci-fi clothes on, like they have tights and helmets and all this kind of stuff, but also like ray guns and what we call today atom punk, which I really hate the terms atom punk and ray punk, because that was the frickin' standard sci-fi of the 1920s, 1930s. That is the very birth of sci-fi. That wasn't like punk stuff. That was standard sci-fi. And to call it ray punk now is...
I would say that science fiction goes earlier, like the birth of science fiction, not space opera and basically space fantasy, which is what you were talking about, but actual science fiction, I would say, was born with Jules Verne and Mary Shelley. I think that these are the ones that really gave birth to the genre, because you have science and scientificity being the magic, quote unquote, in the story. So with Frankenstein, for example, his monster is animated in a non-magical manner. Okay, it's a stretch, but I mean that he supposedly manages to reanimate this monster out of dead bodies through science. And the science isn't really all that inaccurate, because you did have experiments, especially I think in Russia somewhere, or maybe it was the USSR, where they had some experiments with trying to make dead animals spasm, basically, with jolts of electricity and the like. So you do have science fiction there. And then you have Jules Verne, like Journey to, I don't remember because I read them when I was very young.
Journey
but
to the Center of the Earth,
there are
Propeller Islands, 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
The one with the those as well, with the submarine and stuff. But also there was this rocket, I remember, that he
fired out of a gun. It was like a giant bullet.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, it was basically fired, and roughly speaking, rockets are fired into space. But the idea is that he conceived of a space rocket that would take people to other planets and stuff like that. So I do think that that's when science fiction was born.
What I meant was, like, this was the birth of science fiction as a popular medium. Back then, it wasn't. Back then, it was those very few people writing in like a new kind of genre. But it wasn't a genre then. There was only those few people, so it wasn't even sold as that thing. But what happened in the 1920s was they were... you had Hugo Gernsback, who was the fantastic Hungarian-American promoter of books, and he started up his like pulp magazines, and he could reprint Frankenstein, and he could reprint the H.G. Wells stories and Jules Verne stories, because they were out of copyright then, and it was free. So he was reprinting those in some of his magazines, and that really created this new market for stories like that. And he coined the term science fiction. So that was his own way of marketing that as a genre. So those stories did exist in the the early 19th century with Mary Shelley, and the late 19th century with Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, but they didn't really have the traction. It wasn't until they had their second coming in the 1920s that it really became what we know of it as today. So yeah, it had a bit of a rocky start. It's like, pop music by Bob Dylan. He made some fantastic songs, but the really good version of his songs are usually covers that were years later. The cover versions are always better. Or, there's so much fantastic music like, Led Zeppelin, the Levee Breaks and stuff like that. But the originals were done in the 1920s, 1930s by these jazz musicians and blues musicians. But the time it became popular was after Led Zeppelin did their versions of it. So, yeah, there's a weird and twisted path to popularity and existence. So that's that was the birth of the style of stuff that became Star Wars. So that really came out that 1920s Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon stuff, and that was what who's the guy's name? Who's the Star Wars guy?
George Lucas.
George Lucas. So he loved those reels. He freaking loved those little stories. And that was what Star Wars was based on. And Star Wars is just fan fiction for Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon. That's...
I mean, a lot of fans know that he originally wanted to make a Flash Gordon movie, but he couldn't get the rights.
Is that true?
That's why Star Wars exists. Yeah.
Wow.
So he wanted to do like a space opera adventure, a pulpy, space opera. He wanted literally to do Flash Gordon.
And Flash Gordon
not
came out
or...
at pretty much the same time.
Oh. Yeah, very quickly they did a Flash Gordon.
Yes. With Queen as the soundtrack, so it's nothing to sneeze at. Flash. I love it. I freaking love Flash Gordon as a movie. Even though it's silly and campy, it's... When you look at the old original Flash Gordon, it's perfectly, the same kind of thing. They're all campy and stuff like that. So it is a shame to me that Star Wars has moved away from its pulpy space opera origins. It should have really stuck with that instead of just owning the fan kind of memey crap and that has surrounded it, and sort of going.
Yeah. I mean, The Mandalorian, I would say, has brought it back to those. It tells those kind of pulpy adventure stories.
It does. You're right. That's
why I like that. I like the original trilogy, and that's about it.
Rogue One and Solo sort of also take on that mantle somewhat. They're quite good movies.
Right. I haven't seen those yet. I got to see them.
They're worth it. I mean, they have their problems, but they're quite good. Well, anyway, so that's the space opera stuff. There's the hard sci-fi. What about hard sci-fi? Well, Chance has this great novel that she recommends, which is called The Gods of Foxtrot, I think, which is very interesting, and that's about people being cryogenically frozen and reawoken into a future world and coping with the strangeness and the weirdness of the future. So that's quite a good one. I love stories that are speculative about the future. So they're sort of taking a serious look and thinking, okay, so this is the kind of society we've got now. What would the future be like? And it's always actually it's not always, but usually always, it is a projection of the writer's view of their current world and thinking, so if all the same politics, the same sexual politics, the same gender politics existed in the future, like what would it be like with, higher technology? And that's why when you read a lot of old science fiction, from like the 60s or the 70s, it seems a bit old hat, because even though people are, like living forever or have rocket boots, they've still got the same kind of like attitudes of people from 1960, which is often very funny to read when they have that. But most sci-fi is basically just a reflection of your own time dressed up to look, fantastical. Which is important to realize.
Yeah.
If you ever have the misfortune to read Mythmaker, That's the one where the guy takes a lot of drugs and stuff like that. It's a terrible, terrible story, but so silly and crazy and very 1960s and very drug kind of addled.
That's the Hunter S. Thompson book.
There was it's not a book, but it is a nice short story, which I hope never gets made into film because they will ruin it. I'm pretty sure. And it is called Harrison Bergeron or something like that. I don't know how the surname is pronounced. And it is the story about a relatively near future where technology has advanced to a point where you can have all sorts of mobile devices and stuff. So that was written in the late 70s, I think, somewhere. So it is a story about how society tries to be super equal, but the equality that they do is not actually giving equal rights to people, is trying to make everyone fit the exact same mold. So if you have people that are, for example, more talented than the norm, they have to wear mobile devices that impede them so that they perform at the average level, and so on and so forth.
Oh, wow.
So it is illegal to take them off. And as you can imagine, the average level that has been delineated and enforced by the society is actually very low. We're talking about people that are forced to be extremely low in intelligence, low in physical capacity, low in everything. So there is this guy named Harrison Bergeron.
Sounds like Australia.
Who is perfect. Yeah, who is perfect in everything. He is very beautiful, handsome. He is extremely strong. He is extremely intelligent, and he is topping the charts in everything. So he walks around like a monster because he has all the mobile devices on him. So he looks like a junkyard that walks. And at some point, he decides to revolt. And that's his story and the short story. And of course, you have the people that are not wearing the impediments because they are the enforcers of all these things. And we watch the entire thing. We watch everything from the point of view of his parents, who watch TV all the time, and they wear their different things on, like they have things for their intellect and stuff like that. And that's how we watch everything that happens. And I think that it is one of the best short stories that you could have, that is a social commentary plus a very haunting and dystopian, but plausible world, I would say, in a sense. So I highly recommend that. It is a short story, and I'm pretty sure you can find it on the internet.
And is that the title, Harrison Bergeron?
Forced
that sounds great.
Egalitarianism. That's an interesting take on stuff. And I think that is what sci-fi has been used. Like fantasy, you do not typically use fantasy to tackle social issues. You only do that in sci-fi, pretty much. It's very rare that the fantasy story is used in that way. This is another hallmark of science fiction, like especially Star Trek, which did it in all the stories back in the day, stories like that one. They had some. I don't know when that really started. I mean, obviously, like Mary Shelley sort of had that in her story, but I think that Frankenstein takes more from the stories of the day than it does what sci-fi became, because the stories of the day were about, gothic romances and, dark tragedies and stuff like that, and that really fits in more to that genre than it does later stories that tackle what could be. So Jules Verne in his writing was more about it's sort of tackled social issues, especially with, say, 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but it was more about the possibility of the technology. H.G. Wells sort of again, but it was just slightly getting into it. I don't think it's until, people like Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke in that kind of era when we really do start to get into people tackling social issues and doing social commentary. So yeah, more of a 20th century thing than just using a specific, using it as a setting or a style. So what are your guys' favorite intelligent sci-fi?
Back to the Future.
There's a bit of social commentary in that one. It's fun. So Back to the Future is weird in that it's sci-fi set in the present day. It's, set in the 1980s. Filmed in the 1980s and set in the 1980s. And going back to the 1960s. Which is rather interesting. So it never actually goes beyond its time. Unless you're talking about the sequel.
Well, they go, in the sequel, they go all the way to 2015.
Yes. They do go. But it is science fiction, because even
Awesome.
though it's not in the future, it's still using futuristic technology, and it's doing a what if. So that's interesting. It's a good point, Baines. What about you, Pitt? Apart, like you mentioned, Voivod in the
Don't worry, I won't talk about Voivod again. But
go to Patreon, everybody, to hear about that. It's actually kind of cool.
But yeah, go listen to Voivod. They're a great sci-fi band. But movie-wise, I don't know if you'd call it smart sci-fi, but Alien is probably, if I had to pick my favorite sci-fi, it'd probably be something along the lines of like Alien or Terminator. But probably as a franchise, I probably like Alien a little bit better. So I mean, they both have their ups and down points. But Alien, I just love what it does with Alien and Aliens, probably all first 3 movies, I think. Do I remember the third one? I don't know. Well, the first 2 movies, at least. That was Oz blowing snot all over his microphone.
Fuck, I thought that was it was alien slime. Shut up.
It was you're one of those androids. It was like your milk blood coming out.
I wish.
Spewing out of your nostrils.
I am a perfect alien specimen. No, robot specimen. Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay. But yeah, I love what Alien and Aliens does with its setting. It's by nature sci-fi because it's in space, and spaceships and stuff. And what it does is it takes that setting of like being on spaceships and a hostile world, and makes it very claustrophobic and dark, and it plays so well into creating an atmosphere of fear before you even totally understand what's going on. To be afraid in this place. Everything from the sound design of, one of my favorite shots is, I think it's in the first one, and it shows this outside view of like the facility that they're at or whatever it is. And there's no music or anything. It's just the sound of the wind blowing. And it makes it seem off the bat like such a hostile, terrible place to be, and how vulnerable you are just even before the aliens come, and then everything, it's so great at just sending everything off the rails and kind of taking people out one by one until you just have Ripley and the cat left, and then it ups the stakes by she sets the self-destruct on the ship to count down, but then she's got to go back out there to get, I think, like the cat and something else. And I mean, there's been plenty of movies and stuff since, that have done the whole countdown thing, but that still freaks me out to this day, even though I know how it ends, even though I know she finds the cat, and throughout the whole part of that, I'm like, my God, Ripley, what are you doing? Don't go down there. No. Okay, there's the cat. Good. No, don't put the cat down. Don't go down that ladder. Like, although I know how it's going to end. And that's the whole, countdown thing is very sci-fi, for spaceships and stuff. Why they would instill a ship with a countdown mechanism, I don't know, but they had it, and it was to great appeal.
Well,
but yeah, so probably Alien and Terminator, and then would you even say that The Thing is sci-fi?
Definitely is sci-fi, 100%, 100 and
probably that is right up there then too. It probably competes with Alien, I think, for my favorite sci-fi. Because it does the same, not in the same way, but it too creates a very similar atmosphere of being secluded and vulnerable in an alien environment. So
The Thing is a very intelligent. It's because it's John Carpenter's Thing is a remake of an earlier thing, and Who Goes There, I think that was one of the original stories. But so in there you have an alien that's crash landed, and it's a shape changing monster, and it swallows up creatures and imitates them, and it's freaking scary. But I think in there you have John Carpenter turned it into a terrifying horror. But I think one of the original impetuses in that is like the whole red scare thing. Like anybody can be a red, and just take you over. And it's the same with the Body Snatchers. That was the theme in that one as well. One of us, that kind of thing. But freaking scary.
One of us.
But that brings it back again to like how these things are often a reflection of the times,
Yeah.
And if they're done well enough, they can outlast their time. The ideas behind them are so universal and evocative that they still strike a chord with us. Like, The Thing, the Alien is like freaking terrifying. Fahrenheit 451, that's another famous story that keeps on being relevant for various reasons. But those are good picks. Alien especially, because Ridley Scott created a new genre by himself that hadn't existed before, which is gritty shit sci-fi. About crappy people in a shitty ship.
Crappy people. That'll be the tagline: crappy people in a shitty ship.
And now I think that's like most sci-fi is based on that idea. Like if you look at most modern sci-fi, it's all that kind of thing. Like there's a bunch of shitty people on a crappy ship, and they have to fight something. And he was the man behind that, and he wasn't even like, he's not a sci-fi writer. He's just an advertising guy that happened to had clever ideas, and he created Blade Runner. He created Cyberpunk as well. That was him. So the man is like a master. Big props to Ridley Scott. What about you, Baines?
Have I ever created a genre?
Yeah. I mean, what are you behind? What have you ever done with your life, Baines?
Just nothing. I just walk around and I try to remember to,
He's just a
I don't
shitty
know.
person on a crappy ship of
Exactly. Thank you. Exactly.
life.
What are your favorite sci-fis?
Well, I would agree with those, man. Alien and Aliens are amazing, and they're like every bit as great right now, as they were when I first saw them. And they hold up. They're just, they're eternal. And the Thing too, still terrifying.
Yeah.
When I hear something, sorry, I always have to cut in like an idiot, but like with The Thing, whenever I hear, because I like to listen to a lot of, I like to listen to a lot of electronic music now. And whenever I hear anything that's like really synthy, that has those kind of notes, like in the opening, I get like a chill up my back.
Yeah.
Great soundtrack.
That's just your COVID.
It is, yeah. That's just the feeling of dying.
Oh yeah, those. I think a hydrophone is that one of the things that they play to create those sounds. It's a metal bowl with like little spikes coming out of it, and you rub them and stuff. I think that's creates terrifying music.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Baines.
No, I was. I said Back to the Future earlier, so I had my chance.
Oh,
but yeah, I agree. Definitely Alien. Definitely
well,
yeah, that's a standout. I'm a Trekkie too. I love Trek, and I love space opera as a genre. Like Guardians of the Galaxy. I put it in that category. Star Wars, the old trilogy, that stuff. Plausible or implausible doesn't really matter to me. I do like the idea of a believable future. That's a big strength of Alien that people talk about, like how realistic the people are, like crappy people, you say. But they're kind of if they wake up and they're talking about how much extra they're going to get paid because they were brought out of sleep early, and all this kind of stuff, and they're arguing, and they're sort of they're trying to fill time, playing games or whatever. I don't know. I haven't seen it in a long time, but they're very realistic people. It really pulls you in, and The Thing also very believable, even though what happens is so unbelievable. It's they set you up with this believability, which is
it produces very human conflicts and stuff. Like in Alien, something that really resonates now is they find out one of the crew members has been infected with something, and the decision is whether to quarantine. If I remember correctly, the decision is whether to quarantine him and let him kind of die, or to take him out of quarantine and risk helping him, but with the risk of bringing him out of quarantine.
right.
And Ripley is very much for keeping him in quarantine, but everybody else thinks that it's very cruel and stuff, but she's the security officer, and she's like, listen, this is my job. This is what you brought me on here to do. Well, not a security. What is she in that? She
science officer. I don't remember.
Science officer. But she says something along the lines of I'm telling you what I know, or something like that, and I don't think it's safe to bring him out. And in the end, that's the reason why everybody else ends up dying.
Yeah.
Because they brought him out of that. So very human.
Yeah, very much so.
They're human kind of characters. So we've got Ridley Scott doing the first one, and that had a horror kind of theme to it. Then we have James Cameron doing the Aliens, and that had more of an adventure kind of war story sort of feel to it. It's a different kind of film.
Yeah, you're right. And it has his kind of signature at the time of having a child in danger.
Yeah.
You know, they find Newt and
Little
they have
Newt.
to protect her, and yeah.
And he
They
James Cameron.
mostly come out at night. Mostly.
Mostly.
So James Cameron created a very different kind of alien experience with space marines and
Yeah.
gung-ho people with guns. And so you've watched the first film and you've had that feeling of dread and horror thing. How do these people, how would they ever cope with such monsters? Then you have a second film that gives you that fantasy that you have of when you watch the first film. You think, man, if I had a gun or something, I could kill these aliens. Like, this is what I'd do. I'd have flamethrowers. And Cameron gives that to you in the second film. So then you've got, wow, these gung-ho guys, you know, powerful kind of, like, freaking.
You have Ripley in the big
badasses.
armature thing, that huge,
the power lifter.
what's it called? Yeah, the power lifter she gets in to do battle with the Queen Alien, you know, and the whole time you're just like, fuck yeah, you don't get her, Ripley. Stay away from her, you bitch.
So yeah, that gives you that power fantasy that you wanted to have in the first film, because that's a horror, like it's a nightmare. You can't do anything about it. You're pretty powerless. The only way you've got is just to survive and then destroy everything. Second film, it's like, here's the tools to fight back, but they still all die pretty much.
But you're right, though, about those very distinct feelings from the first film to the second film, and they complement each other so well too. Because like having just like another Alien movie, I'm sure it could have been great, but I really like the way James Cameron evolved it, like the way he did with Terminator 2. In the first Terminator movie, it was good. I liked it, but I don't like it anywhere as near as much as I like Terminator 2, and it very much has that aliens quality to it.
Yeah.
And of course,
I agree. The first one I find a little tough to watch even. I mean, Alien and Aliens, that's a good debate. I think that could go forever. Which one's better?
Yeah.
Terminator, I think T2 is the winner.
Yeah, I agree.
Like
I like
clearly.
that one too.
Yeah.
Can I say something? I just came to me right now. I would say that one of the better science fiction movies is the first Godzilla, like the first one.
Oh, from the 50s.
From the 50s. The one that came out like 10 years after the war or something. So it is played as horror. It is played as a direct result from the nuclear fallout, not from the nuclear fallout from the actual World War II atomic bombs, but from the experimenting that was done in the atolls. I don't remember how they were called.
Yeah, the Bikini Atoll and stuff like that, and all of the nuclear testing that was done in
the ones that were near Japan anyway, like relatively near Japan. And it is science fiction because you have all this science surrounding the idea of how this kaiju, this giant lizard, was made, and the lizard itself is the big terror, like aliens. That's why the movie came to me, because you almost never see Godzilla, and it is a menace. You always see the results of the destruction that he did. Anyone that goes to actually see him, and try to see what it is, or to deal with him, dies. And I find that it is a very nice, like allegory, I would say, or analogy of the nuclear terror and the hubris of man, basically, because this is a man-made problem. But also it is played very nicely as a horror movie, which I haven't really seen in later Godzilla movies. They completely turned that on its head, and I'm a bit disappointed, I would say. I like Godzilla as this big sort of Frankenstein's monster kind of thing that harps on humanity as the nemesis to humanity's hubris. That's my thoughts.
Yeah,
it's very striking.
Interesting take, yeah. Going back to Godzilla, Gojira, and of course the classic version with Matthew Broderick.
yes.
Tan's just hung her head in shame. Or disappointment, I think I would say. Disappointment.
Yeah, that was a stupid film. It like totally undermined.
Also, he plays like a geek character, I think, or something like that, which is so damn embarrassing. Like, please stop. Thank you.
And then there's a whole cartoon based around it. And
oh my, really?
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah.
Well, it's done really well. It's in the style of like the Men in Black cartoon. It's like really good animation, but it has nothing whatever to do with Godzilla and the whole Godzilla thing. You know, like Godzilla's this kind of girl lizard thing that has a maternal instinct and like has little babies and oh Jesus Christ, it's what the hell moves at the speed of sound. Has this giant lantern jaw. God's sake.
Well, on the note of big monster sci-fi, kaiju, right?
Yeah.
Have you guys ever seen Cloverfield?
Yeah, I saw the first one.
Tanya has, yeah. Her sound is off. But I vouching for her. She rose her finger, and I read her lips, and she said, I have. And a lot of people, they can take or leave the first person camera thing. I still personally quite like it when it's done well enough. Because I like that feeling of being right there. And I really liked it with that movie because it took the idea of the giant alien monster invasion and with that first person perspective, it kind of puts you right there. And I haven't seen it for years, but I remember I really liked it for a long time because of that feeling of like, you could easily imagine how terrifying it is and how small people would feel in that situation. You can almost like feel the vibrations when the building shakes or when the power flickers, how terrifying that is. Or like, the sounds that are made, it had really unique, impressive sound effects that were legitimately scary to hear because it sounded like something coming from a really big thing. And I just love how it took that approach with the kaiju and that you're not watching this thing from afar wreck buildings. You're one of the people in those buildings, and you just need to survive. But there's just chaos everywhere. And then the little monsters come out and stuff and start attacking people. And they can never be friendly monsters, I guess, or else you wouldn't have a movie. I might watch a movie like that about a friendly kaiju. He's just big. You can't help it.
What was that movie called? It was like a romantic story, but there was a kaiju involved. I haven't seen it.
Oh
damn,
romantic
kaiju? On
kaiju?
Netflix. No, like the kaiju, like this woman is controlling a kaiju, but she doesn't even know it. And there's like a love story or something. I keep meaning to see it, but I haven't.
Oh.
It doesn't sound familiar to you guys?
No.
I think maybe Anne Hathaway is in it.
I'm only thinking of The Shape of Water, which is a very different kind of movie.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah. As soon as he said like monster and like romance, I immediately went to The Shape of Water, which I still haven't seen yet. I'd like to.
Nor have I. Heard it was good.
It's basically...
I'll find this.
Shape of Water is basically Amelie, but with a monster.
I probably am a heathen, but I was bored and I didn't finish it.
Oh. Burner.
It's not a bad film. It's very romantic, but it's very much Amelie in a lot of ways.
It is. Oh my god! Like, why did they have to make it? Like, I don't like the idea that a person that has some kind of disability only can connect to a person that is also a monster. That I didn't like that notion.
See,
I
Tance
found it a
is
little
too
bit
woke
offensive.
to like it. Sorry, Tance.
Exactly,
I'm
exactly. And
We
also
just need
there's
to
this
correct her
other.
a little bit.
Yeah, correct me, please. So yeah, I didn't like that. I sometimes I have these weird takes on movies that I cannot unsee, and I hate them. But that also bored me. I hated it, and it bored me, so I didn't finish it.
Ooh, speaking
Because
of...
I expect that
Yeah.
it would finish like a splash, only more dramatic.
Well,
So
speaking
yeah.
of that, like, wokeness that is slightly wrong is, of course, another James Cameron film, Avatar, which when we've got the, I think we've talked about it before, probably have, but he flubbed that in that, the native space aliens are, basically Native Americans, but they're like cat monsters, which is really, like, yeah,
And like
stupid.
the idealized Native Americans. I haven't seen it, so I can't speak. But
I
from
have seen
the idea that I've gotten from people, it's that it goes with the whole, the mystical Native American kind of aspect, which has been beaten to death.
White guy to say like
Yeah.
Kipling would love this movie. It's basically a dramatization of the white man's burden, in my opinion.
No.
Dances with Wolves, it's got that, the guy becomes native and joins the natives and attacks his bad colonial...
But you know what? Dances with the Wolves, though, has the decency not to have the white guys save the Indians. Like, they are basically in the same city situation they were before he joined them. So I respect him for that. There's that.
Yeah. But is that... I mean, even Solo, which was a good film, we have Space Africans in there, which was really a bit of a flub in that if you're going to have, like, a native kind of people who are suffering from colonialism, don't make them African space people. That's just dumb. Make them, like, as, because, like, you've got humans in space, we can't still have African people in that kind of, like, submissive kind of put upon role. They should be, part of the, like, Landau Cruisin'. They should be part of the human tribe. Don't separate them.
Yeah,
into...
they're still on the periphery. You're saying, like,
exactly.
it's too on the nose too. Yeah, it's like, because it's still fetishizing of people.
Precisely, it's just so...
basically.
Like, you've got Ewoks, you've got, like, millions of other, like, made-up alien tribes. Just stick them in that role. Don't put humans who are already suffering on Earth into that kind of, post-colonial kind of fucking thing. Anyway, yeah.
That reminds me... Of course, it's not fantasy. It is not sci-fi. It is urban fantasy. But that reminds me of it was very famous.
Hey, come a little bit closer to your mic. I'm sorry, Tange, but you got quiet.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I said that this is urban fantasy. It is not actually science fiction, but it really reminds me of Bright and the whole analogy of like the orcs were basically colored people, and it's painful just to think about it. It's like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, orcs totally take on becoming, African Americans, but there are still African Americans. Like, it's so dumb.
You made an actual sound of pain just now.
It's so stupid, and it's got Will Smith in it. Like, fuck, Will, come on, have a bit more sense. Like, yeah, it's just so silly. Oh well, we sort of. Oh, go on, Tant. Sorry.
No, you go.
I was just going to say we're sort of over the hour point, so we should sort of start to wrap up. But I'm not going to tread on your thing there if you wanted to.
No, the only thing I wanted to say is that when you do want to do some social commentary, the first thing is to be extremely careful of how you symbolize what and how you shorthand certain ideas, concepts, peoples, races, all of that. And that is a problem in both fantasy and science fiction. If it's not done right, it comes across as very ham-fisted and extremely superficial, let's say. So,
exactly.
I mean, weirdly enough, now that you're saying this, it kind of undercuts one of the advantages that sci-fi and fantasy, but I would say especially sci-fi, had in the past, which was to be able to address these things that they weren't allowed to talk about in the early days of TV and stuff like that. Like there was sort of you couldn't address certain topics, and by cloaking it in sci-fi and making different groups aliens or making like addressing politics, but it's future fantasy politics, so you're not going after real world people or parties or institutions, by painting them as real world contemporary things. So obviously you're losing that advantage of sci-fi getting to address this stuff and be more kind of universal and having a deeper message. That jazz.
Yeah.
Very true. Yeah. Well, of course, is the classic science fiction, thing from Star Trek, the original series with the black and white guy and the white and black guy, and they hate each other because you're black on one side and like it's the wrong side. You're white on the one side, but it's the wrong side, so we can't be friends. And they have a big world war over it. Basically, they're just the same, which tackled the idea of racism. So it's a very simplistic way, but simplistic but clever, rather than Bright, where they just do it so badly.
District 9 did a great job, that movie, of exploring like prejudice and racism in a sci-fi, like a sci-fi allegory.
Yes, District 9, very clever. The Neil Blomkamp film. Very, very clever director, writer, and turning that into an intelligent sci-fi and dealing with the idea of prejudice and racism by having the guy transform into that which he despises and having to suffer.
And he wasn't even I mean, speaking of just a finer point, I guess, like the character wasn't really ham-fistedly written to be like a raging racist against aliens. It was just kind of the casual racism because that was the culture, that these aliens were considered less. And he was just part of that. And it was like very casual. It was very well done. Yeah. And then, he ends up completely transformed.
Calling them
throughout the movie.
Yeah.
Right.
And the way he treats these creatures, you can very easily think about, hang on, that's the way like the white people were treating the African people, or South African people back in like the 70s and the 80s and stuff like that before apartheid. So you can get more of a sense of how bad that racism was by watching that and seeing it in a different context. It's not like it makes it safe. it's changing the context in order to change the way you look at it to help you understand it better, which is the strength of sci-fi. That's
more
how
universality.
Yeah, rather than just.
But wouldn't it have been better if all the aliens had like Jewish accents or something?
Oh God, yeah. Oh yes, that's. If it was James Cameron, I'm sure. That's exactly what
that would have been his version.
Yeah,
the Avatar version.
And their guns would look like menorahs or something, and it's got symbolism.
They're science fiction multi-guns, guys. Like,
Yes,
you are reading too much.
It's got all those barrels. All right. Well,
one last thing, and I'm going to let you wrap this up. There was this very interesting and Greek movie that was out of science fiction in the sense that for some reason the natural order of things had changed, and due to some kind of thing in the water or whatever. And there were the natural pairing that was considered the norm, like a super mainstream, was homosexuality rather than heterosexuality. So what we have is a heterosexual couple on the receiving end of all the discrimination, all the bias, all the issues that the LGBTQ community faces. So basically what the movie does is puts the mainstream people into the shoes of the non-mainstream people. And it is extremely heartfelt and treated very tastefully. And it makes you feel like you're looking through the eyes of a person that is homosexual. So I think that is how social commentary should be done, is my opinion anyway. So yeah, that's it. Sorry.
Right.
Wrap it up.
Don't apologize. That was good. All right then. We'll wrap up now. So this has been our QUACKCAST on science fiction. And there's been a bit of science friction as we've discussed our different opinions. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to QUACKCAST number 530 in the year 5,030 AD. Okay, I've been Ozonation and you've been
Year 2525. Come on, guys.
25.
The year 2525.
In the year 2525. That's such a bad song. All right. Thank you guys for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.